My name is Paul Jordan. I'm the Director for the Funding and Development Programme, which the core funding scheme sits within. So what I want to do is probably some of this will be this will be old news too. Some of it will be new in terms of some of the information this morning. But one of the things I would say is that this year we have updated the guidance notes and we've updated some of the application forms and stuff as well. So it's important, supposed to be, to make you aware of that, just in terms of some of the information this morning. It'll be important to kind of going through the guidance notes, and you may be familiar with the core scheme in the past, but there's just some things this year that we've kind of added in. So just to make you aware of that. This is for the scheme that will be running from April 23 forward. So at this stage, in terms of we'll be getting through the process, and this is the beginning of that. And then the stages will go through in terms of once the applications come in post the 16th of November, they'll be assessed. Our board will oversee that, and then decisions are to be made in February. That's when the board meets to look at all the applications, and then certain notifications goes out. Then it's aiming, so the work is for work that will be starting from the 1st of April 2023. So a wee bit of background just in terms of CRC and what we do. So we're an arm's length body of the Executive Office. And we administer the core funding programme, so that's where this funding comes from. It's from the Executive Office. The aim of it really is to complement the funding provided by TAO across a number of things, but it's across a number of programmes around the delivery of the Together Building a United Community policy and the priorities of that. The core scheme is unique in that it contributes to salary and running costs for organisations with a strategic importance in delivering community relations work in Northern Ireland. So what does that mean? And it's simplified. Really, it's looking at the core costs of your organisation. It's not project costs. So it's looking at the costs you need for salaries and for key people within your organisation. And that's very focused on delivering good relations work. So it's organisations and programmes that are focused on delivering on that. The focus of the scheme is to address sectarianism. I know that in terms of with other programmes, we'll look at a broader sort of cultural diversity issues and looking at addressing racism, but the core scheme is focused on addressing sectarianism. That's what it said. That's what it's kind of its purpose is. The annual budget, subject to confirmation, going into next year, is 1.2 million. Now, in terms of the budget, as you know, we fund organisations over between 1 and 3 years. So every year there'll be some groups that are coming to the end of their contract and some groups that will be continuing on into the second year. We estimate that this year there'll be around 450 to 500,000 available in terms of new work that we want to fund. Now that means that it is going to be strong competition in terms of that. And that's, for us, that's no bad thing, because in terms of what we want to get the best projects possible and support that. In relation to, as I say, sometimes it's easier to get a job with Google. Sometimes people think, is it impossible to get core funding? No, it's not impossible, but the competition is strong. There's no question of that. So hopefully this morning is about helping you make the best application you can make, and to be clear on that. And also to consider if this scheme is the best scheme for you. You know, there may well be, and I understand in terms of funding is very tight, and but you have to consider, is this the best investment of your time and putting the bid in? So hopefully this morning will give you a bit of an idea in terms of where do you think actually you could fit in with the core funding scheme, and it seems. We're currently supporting 29 organisations, and 12 of these contracts are due to expire in 2023. We generally fund between 27 and 30 organisations per year. If you actually go onto our website, there's a link of some of the groups that we fund under the core funding program. So you'll be able to see that yourself to give you an idea and a flavour of just the work that we're currently supporting. In terms of checking, we have a kind of pre-assessment stage. So it's one of those things that we kind of go through. Part of it is just trying to it's just part of the selection process, as it. So, in terms of that part of the assessment, first thing is the organisation legally able to operate in Northern Ireland? Is the organisation financially viable in that it has, in terms of there's financial controls in place, it has clear links of funding that's coming in. It has its annual, its audited accounts, things like that. But it's looking at it and saying that in terms of, because we cannot fund all of it, we can fund up to 90% of posts. So there's always some form of funding that you'll need to get in addition to core. So it'll cover as much as we can, but there's still a thing where we encourage people to say you'll need to be able to find additional funding to cover it for the post. So that needs to be kind of there and in place. So it's looking at the financial and reporting systems are in place. These are your policies and procedures that you have. So you need, and those are things that we'll ask for as part of the application process. Next thing, is there an adequate communications or quality policy and operation? Really, it's about saying, are you a good relations organisation? Is it something that it's part of your business? So you'll have those kind of policies in place already. One of the things that happens every year, and it's something that we, unfortunately, it means the application needs to be fully completed. And all the documentation required and the additional information declaration section is there. It happens nearly every year where you will get an application that's partially incomplete. Now, some of the system, and Damien will talk a wee bit about that in a second. The online system tries as best it can to kind of tell you haven't filled this in or something missing. So that will kind of keep you right as you go through. But there is, in terms of the additional information that you upload, the system doesn't recognize if you upload two documents that are the same. So it's regarded as, if not all the information is there, it's an incomplete application. And as such, we can't take it forward. So it's really important that you make sure you have everything there before you hit the submit button. The next thing is does the work described in the applicant's work plan meet the specific remit of the program? Sometimes people will, and I know, as I said, there's a high competition for support and work, but there is a point in some of the work we can say, look, that's clearly outside the remit of what we do. So it may well be something like, it's working with it's working in an area that's not addressing community relations directly. That's where we would say, like, it doesn't fit with the kind of criteria of the program, and that's what you need to kind of stick to. It's no reflection on your work or the importance or the value of what you're doing. It's just in terms of the fit with a specific program, and that's really all it is in terms of that. So, as I say, it's not a point of saying, "Oh, your work's not important." It's saying, like, it doesn't fit with core, and this is quite a specific scheme. And how the proposed beneficiaries all Northern Ireland based. That's part of all our grant schemes, just the nature where the funding is from the executive office. So it's for those beneficiaries that are resident in Northern Ireland. I know I'm going through this, but bear in mind, you'll have a copy of this and you'll be able to reflect back on it again. So we can go through it and you can go through it and your own leisure and your own time. In terms of strategic priorities, I'm going to hand over to Damien. Damien McNally is our evaluation officer. Damien works in the programme and is part of the kind of the assessment process as we go through. So Damien's going to take you through just in terms of the strategic priorities, the welcome statements, and also a wee bit about the programme in terms of the online, the application form. So
so I'm just going to there's only 2 slides here that I'm taking you through, and then we're going to go in and have a look at the application form. So through the application form, it's going to be really myself and Paul taking you through the different parts of it, kind of just an online demonstration, okay? But just to say about my role briefly, I'm the evaluation officer, so I'm the lovely person that sends you out those progress reports that everybody absolutely loves filling in. But again, it's just to kind of reiterate with you that the information is so useful and valuable to us, and it's this sort of thing that we use the information for. So we use the information to try and map basically where the work's taking place, to identify any gaps. And that can be gaps from a kind of a geographical perspective or a strategic perspective in terms of the type of work that's going on, okay? But I'll talk to you a wee bit more about that when we're going through the application form. So it's just to say briefly that through the work over the last number of years, we've just identified some areas that we have put in as these are the welcome statements. So just based on the work that's currently being delivered on the core funding programme, we've just identified these areas where we particularly welcome applications that are going to engage and work in these areas. So you have the 8 areas there: Ards and North Down, Belfast East and South, Fermanagh and Omagh, Lisburn, Castlereagh, Mid and East Antrim, Mid Ulster, and Newry, Mourne and Down. Okay, so again, that's just reflecting what we've seen over the last number of years. But Paul will probably say a wee bit more about this later on. The main thing that we're looking for is, the main thing that you have to be concerned about is putting in as good an application as you can. So don't be worrying at the minute if you're saying, well, am I going to be penalised because I'm not working in these specific areas? No, you won't. But it's the main thing is you put in the best application and the one that's going to score the highest. Okay, so again, but Paul can say something more about that. But at the minute, that's just reflecting where the levels of work are probably slightly lower than other areas at the minute. That, this obviously reflects to a certain extent, the population in these areas, or just the type of work that is ongoing, or the type of priorities that are in those areas. Okay, but you can ask me more about that as we go on. So if we're just going to the next slide, if that's okay. So again, it's just these 2 areas about reflecting on the kind of thematic impact. So again, it's welcoming kind of work that's going to, work on areas of our safe community and our shared community. Now, in terms of these are the 4 TBRC priority headings. So you have these 2 together with our cultural expression and then our children and young people. Again, this is just reflecting where the levels of work tend to kind of be lower. It's probably more in terms of our safe community. That's kind of community safety activity, which is, probably a difficult enough area of work to be engaged in. And then our shared community, where people are kind of, whether they're providing a shared space or trying to develop more shared spaces, for example, in rural communities. So again, it's just reflecting that. But as I say, the main thing is to provide just basically the best application that's going to score the highest, and that's going to be the main thing. And then we tend to look at these issues after that. Okay.
Most of you kind of logged on to the portal. So if you kind of register your organisation, so most of you will probably, if you've had a grant from us before, your organisation stuff will be registered on that. But just to take you through in terms of, if you see this first part, the deadline is 4 o'clock on Wednesday, 16th of November. The system is set up that you can't, it's automatic. So if you put an application in after that, it won't be, it'll not accept it. One of the things I would say is that sometimes, and it has happened, is that applications, sometimes someone has submitted the application before the deadline and then realized they made a mistake. What you have to do is actually, the way the system works is you actually have to withdraw the application, and then you'd have to resubmit again. It's a lot of kind of work. What I would suggest you do, as you're filling in the application, you can download it as a PDF file, so you can save it. So at least you have it on file. So if there was something wrong, there's information you can carry across. But you really, it's something that I would advise against. So don't submit until you absolutely are content with what you have. The guidelines, if you see, there's a link to the guidelines. So that's there. So if you can click on those, that'll take you through the program guidance. There's some really helpful stuff in there just to keep you right. There's nothing to try and trick anyone. It's just trying to be as straightforward as we can. You'll see on the front there in terms of the welcome statements. So they're on the front of that. And as you come down, you'll see in terms of there's the key parts of the program. So in terms of your organization, so there's a click on that, and then that's kind of filling in the information in terms of your organization and the key contact. Bear in mind is that any correspondence will be with that person. So make sure it's someone that's available, someone that can actually, if there's a follow-up or it's a question, that they'll be able to answer that. So that's just in recording on that. The main body of the work is going to be based on your work plan. Okay, so this is key. It's about what you're going to be doing in terms of that work plan. So if we jump back there, but in terms of that, Damien's going to take you through just in terms of the work plan on that. That's well, I get us up there. So in terms of that, Damien, do you want to just talk a wee bit about the work plan and just take people through that as things go on?
Yeah, Paul, sorry, just before that, do we need to cover the organisation bit, just about putting in the organisational information just at the start, if that's okay?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Everybody's done it, but it's just in case there's anybody who maybe hasn't seen it. But
yes,
sorry.
So we looked at no, absolutely. So here's the kind of contact information and loading up on your organization's details. So you can have to complete that, and then let's say just ask your organization type, and that has to be completed. Now, anything that is missed, if you see on a star, has to be completed. The information put into that. Now, in relation to that, it will keep you right. So if you come down to the bottom of the page, and you see, so it'll ask for like describe your organization's main purpose and communications activities, and a short description about your organization. Now, there's a word limit on this. What I would say is that the purpose of it is that as I say to everyone in the place, plain English is absolutely fine. Blunt, straightforward. This is who we are. This is what we do. That's the simplest way to do it. Sometimes people feel like they need to put a context or a broad history in. It's helpful to say, we were established. So you may say we were established in 1998. This is what we do. But there does need to be a large backstory of what you do, but it's what you're doing presently now. That's the kind of the kind of key on that. So once you get that completed, that'll take you through onto the next page. So you see down the bottom there, you have a choice. You can save progress, so you can come back to it, or you can, once that's completed, you can go on to the next page. And then that should take you through into the kind of stages in terms of the key work areas proposed. David, do you want to jump in at this point?
Yep. Thanks, Paul. Alana, is it okay if we just go to return the summary briefly and just to show everybody what tends to happen here, and then we'll go back into the work plan. Okay, so folks, if you just see on the on this summary page, okay, so Paul's just at the first bit, your organization. So we're going into, you'll see from number 2 to number 10 here. So these are the work areas, okay. So you have up to 6 work areas to choose to put in. Okay, so I'm going to go through one work area with you, and I'll show you as well that the system basically asks you to confirm. For example, if you just have one work area and you don't need any more, the system actually needs you to go through work areas 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6 and confirm that you don't need an additional work area. It's just one of the what we're going to choose the idiosyncrasy of this system, but it's just asking you to confirm that you're happy and content, that you've done all the work areas that you want. And then we'll go into organization management and development, and then that's where I'll pass back to Paul at that stage. Okay, so it's just to say that Alana, can I just go up the page just briefly there? Just up a wee bit. Yeah, so if Alana just highlights on, see that Paul mentioned that download as PDF button there. It's just a very important button there. And again, we're recommending, thanks very much, Alana, we're recommending to everybody to particularly when you've got to the end of your application and before you submit it, to download as a PDF. That just provides you with it. You know, you can get all the information that's in a more kind of readable, user-friendly a document, and I would advise you to whoever's making the application to read over that and also to share it with whoever has to co-sign the application, you know, whether that's a chairperson from your board or somebody else from the board, to get them to read over it and to make sure that they're happy and content with all the information. And it's particularly important at that stage as well to check that you have uploaded the right documents into the right place, as Paul alluded to there earlier. So for example, it's where it's asked you for management accounts, that you've made sure you've uploaded the right document there, and then your organizational audit accounts or whatever else it is up into the right place. So it's just important to, I just find it a useful tool, you know, when you're trying to get an overview of the application. So if I just go down again, thanks Alana, just down to the summary. So we're going to go into your work plans now. Okay, so you'll see them all there. They're sitting in progress at the minute. I've put some dummy information into them just to get things started, but I'll just take you through this. Look, and if we have any questions, we can go through all of those at the end. All right. So basically, everything with an asterisk here that Paul talked about, this is mandatory information. And you'll see any part here, if you're ever looking, see this blue box you see up here, you won't see that blue box. That's just a thing we have in behind our system here, just for us to kind of cross-check things. So don't be worrying about that. You'll not see that. Okay. So it's basically just, firstly, it's to put in, just provide a project title. So I just put in CR project, but again, it's only got a 20-word max. So again, that's just a very brief kind of title for what project you're talking about. As I said, this is one work area, and you can provide up to 6 work areas. But what we would always say to people is, if you feel that one work area covers all of the work you're wanting to do, so you could be doing one large project, but doing that on a regional basis, okay, or something like that. That's okay. That's fine. That won't go against you. If you're into 2, we would tend to kind of average maybe 2 to 3 work areas, and there's obviously some organisations that would go up to 6. But what I would say to everybody is, if you find yourself doing more work areas and you're starting to repeat yourself, you would need to then say, look, I need to think about this. And look, this is something that we would always have a conversation with groups about. If they find, look, there's some other bits and pieces that I'm not really sure where to put this, you can talk to us and we can maybe kind of give you a bit of general advice. Obviously, we cannot and will not tell you what to write or where to put it, but we can give you a kind of general sense of, look, if this is coming into something that's looking pretty strategic, you know, then that's okay to do that. But I think that would probably be the emphasis, is that to make sure that your work is of a kind of more of a strategic nature. So don't feel the need to go into, if you're struggling when you're going into work areas 5 and 6, then you should really take time and pause and say, look, you know, could this fit somewhere else in one of the existing work areas, or what's the best way to go through that? But you can obviously drop us an email or give us a call just to ask about that. Okay, so just going into this next part. So sorry, Alana, just go up there. Sorry, just where I was going to the so just asking if there's any other funders that are currently supporting your work or likely to support your work. Again, we understand that you're putting an application in November time for work that's going to start in April. So you might not necessarily know if other funders are going to be coming in to support that, but it's just, again, it's giving us a general indication of who else might be supporting your work. And obviously, as time comes, we'll change these categories from, at the minute, we're in between Peace 4 and Peace Plus, but we'll change that into Peace Plus. But anyway, it's just to say that, yeah, this also helps us in terms of whenever we're doing our evaluation work, in terms of talking to other funders who are currently supporting work in the core funding program to get a sense of how the work's developing and other things that we may need to kind of talk about and kind of with yourselves about how the work is developing. It's all about kind of supporting each other and sharing the information. Okay. And then if you just go down, if you want to choose another funder, you can do that as well. We understand as well that there's other funders that we haven't listed there who would support your work, whether that's, it could be, Big Lottery, Roundtree, or the various kind of trusts out there that support your work. And then next we just asked to provide an overall kind of indication of generally where this work is going to be taking place. So this is for only one work area. Okay. So you're just putting information in this one work area that you're talking about at the minute. Okay. And then it's whatever district councils you think, the work is most likely to be taking place in. Okay. And then we'll go down beyond that. We're asking you to choose a TBUC heading. Folks, what I would say, and I should have said at the start, is that, and I'll show you at the top of this before we go on, but at the top of the work plan, there's a button there where you can click to get the core funding outcomes and the core funding main themes. Okay. Now, what we did when we were putting the system together was basically depending on what TBUC priority heading you use, that will limit the number of other themes that you can choose below in terms of breaking your work into kind of themes and then into kind of longer term outcomes. Okay, so it does limit it on that. Again, it's just that's based on what we have seen over the years about how the work is generally broken down. And I would ask you to basically use those documents, and it's just basically a list of the main outcomes and the main things that we would fund to help you to decide whether core funding is the right place for you. If you're able to kind of use those sort of themes and outcomes to kind of break down your work, that's fine. But if you feel you're struggling a wee bit, again, you can have a conversation with us on that. But as we go down this drop down, so I have currently under our safe community. Okay, so Alana, if you maybe just click on that just to show the four. So you've got basically the four main TBUC headings. Okay, children and young people, shared community, safe community, and our cultural expression. So Alana's chosen our safe community. Okay, so that's fine. And then whenever we go into the next box there, it's giving you a number of themes. Now we also have some themes under the core funding program. Now, that's the purpose of that is to give a wee bit more kind of depth and detail behind each of the themes. And this helps us in terms of our communication with the executive office and saying, look, under our safe community, here's some of the work that has been taking place. So we've listed our community safety and sectarianism work, and then some that, you probably would call more slightly single identity work, with PAL and CNR communities. Again, I know that these labels are sometimes not ideal, but it's just the way that our work is broken down at the minute. But again, it's just to give a wee bit more detail. And in the core funding themes in the document that's at the top of this page, it gives you a wee bit more detail about what we're meaning when we're talking about community safety. And then the other stuff, the PAL and CNR, kind of more slightly single identity work. Okay, but that's up the top of the page. So yeah, Alana, I suppose it doesn't. If you want to just pick whatever one you want there, I'll give you the exciting task of checking there. Now, there's also room if you want to choose a secondary theme. Again, it's just the same themes again. If you feel there's something else I want to say about this, but again, there's no red asterisk beside that, so that's not mandatory. So you don't need to choose that, so that's okay. So we'll probably just leave that one, Alana. Now this next part is just asking you what you plan to do. So there's up to 200 words max. So that's where you basically describe what am I going to do in this area of work. Okay, so you can, again, that's really just helpful for us to kind of build up a picture about what program of work you're wanting to deliver. So Alana, you can just add in some dummy information in there. What I will do down here, folks, is whenever we go to one of these boxes, I'll purposely leave it blank so it can show you what happens at the end, just to make sure that you have all the information. But again, look, that box is just asking you for a general summary of what you're wanting to do, okay? But you obviously give a bit more details down below around some of the more specifics in that work, okay? Now, this next question is basically asking you where this work needs to take place. So that's where that's basically your needs analysis, okay? So again, whenever you're completing this part of the application, would probably advise you again to look back to the original documents in terms of the TBUC main headings and then the Programme for Government main headings. And again, it's just really trying to link your work into those kind of strategic priority areas and saying why your work needs to happen. Okay, so that's basically, this is a really important part of the document, and it's going to be a very important part of the assessment process to kind of build up that picture about why you're doing the work and why you feel it needs support. Okay, so Alana, we'll maybe just leave that one blank, will we? We're just going to leave it purposely blank, folks, just to show you what happens whenever you go to the bottom to save progress of the system. We'll basically highlight that you haven't uploaded something or you haven't added something. Again, if you have the opportunity here in this box below it to upload any documents that you think might be important in terms of your needs assessment. So that could be, it's probably more internal documents. So if you either have like any kind of research or an evaluation piece or any kind of strategic document that makes reference to the kind of areas of work you're engaging in that you feel would kind of help to kind of demonstrate the kind of how you've assessed your need, or if there's any other documents, you can upload those, but you need to make kind of direct reference. So you can't just upload any kind of random document, but if there's something there you feel would be useful, again, I'd say probably more internal type of documents for your organization, then you can put them in there. Okay, so that's okay, Alana. So we'll probably just leave that, not upload anything, but again, the system will trigger that something needs to be uploaded there. All right. Now, this next box here is about how does your work area align with public policy and community relations issues, TBUC, or the outcomes delivery plan. So again, folks, what I would say is that's particularly where you would need to make reference some way to those kind of documents that we've referred to. So it's, TBUC and the Programme for Government. So if you're talking about doing work, it's referencing, whatever TBUC head and RCA community, our shared community, whatever else is more relevant to you. Again, it's just showing that you've made the link between your work and the overall kind of strategic objectives of the funding program here. Okay, so again, Lana, you can just put in some dummy information there as well. Okay, as Paul said as well, look, you just need to make sure that whenever you're putting in any information, so the system now will say, well, there's been information put in here, so it can't, it can't warn you that to say actually the information you put in isn't relevant to this section, or it's not answering the question. You need to be, again, you need to make sure that you're happy and content with the information that you've added in there. Okay. Now, again, folks, we've just asked this question around about considering the impact of COVID-19. That has been obviously a bigger issue over the past 2 years, and that's why the question was added. It's obviously, hopefully becoming less important, but again, we just 100% don't know what's going to happen in the winter or afterwards. And we were probably just asking you to put something in there, it doesn't have to be anything major. It's just whether, experience in the past where people have maybe had to move to online delivery and things like that, whether that's been in a community setting or an open course difficulty if you're trying to do some work in schools and things like that. But again, it's just kind of based on your own experience probably over the last 2 years of having to work within a COVID scenario about what you would do if you had to kind of move to a different method of delivery or engagement. And you can say something that, doesn't have to be particularly long in there, but just say something briefly. All right, so thanks, Alana. Now, this is for anybody who hasn't filled in these application forms before, this is probably the area where you're thinking, oh my God, what is this? But what we're asking people to do is as best as possible for you to give us a sense of the organizations and places that you would hope to be working with over the next. Now, this work plan, okay. Now, you might be asking for funding for either 2 or 3 years. Okay, but this work plan that we're talking about today is only over the next year. So from April 2023 to April 2024. And then if you're successful, we generally ask groups for a work plan for the year going on around about January time. Okay, so anybody that would be successful now, we would be asking for a work plan for 24, 25 coming in January 24. I'm losing track of the years here. But anyway, so this is just for the next year that you're planning to do. And what we're asking for is where you can be as specific as you can about, for example, I've got, women's group in Lisburn. So again, it's just to ask you what group you hope to be working with, to add in a postcode where you can. Again, this is so important for us when we're trying to map the work afterwards and we use this in whenever we come to the funding meeting in February time, it's pretty much, during that meeting that we try to give a sense of what kind of response has the overall program made to the kind of welcome statements, or how are we operate, how are we, and again, look, it is to say that it's not that issue of, if you're not working in those welcome statement areas, it's not that it's going to be held against you. It's just helps us build up a general picture about where the work is taking place. And, for example, if we're still finding gaps, like we have other funding programs like the small grants program, that might help us to kind of address some of those gaps. So again, it's just don't be getting yourself concerned about that. And then it's just asking about the district council that it's going to be in. So again, that's just useful for us for mapping. And then the number of end beneficiaries that you're hoping to work with. Now, we've got it in females, males, PEL, CNR, and other identities. Again, I know that these labels, and we're limited, unfortunately, with this system, that we can only have up to eight columns across the page, and we can't have any more. So it's just, again, a general sense of the breakdown of the communities you're hoping to work with. And again, we know that during the year that these numbers and figures can change. And again, that's okay. But again, it's just at this stage, if you can give us a sense of who you hope and intend to be working with. And I don't want to, we don't want to, suppose, people just picking things out of the air. We do want a general sense of organisations that you maybe have a history of engaging with and working with, or others that you have we definitely want to work with these communities, stroke organisations over the year. So look, the test, the information in that first box there about who they were, that can be either a particular group or a particular community or people that you want to be working with. But as long as we can get a general sense of where that's going to take place, where is the core funding kind of actually making an impact on the ground. So you just basically add that information for as many as you want. I'll just ask Alana there, just if you hit the add another row button, Alana. I know that this is basically allows you to add another row of information, but what you'll find is whenever you hit that, sometimes it throws you down the page and you just need to go up again. So there's another row added in there. Okay. So you just continue on doing that until you've got all the information in there that you want. Okay. So thank you, Alana. So if we just go down to the outcomes end of things now, on the outcomes end of things, it's us asking about your general sense of what you're wanting to achieve over the longer term with this work. So again, we're asking for a 1-year work plan here, but this is, I suppose, what you're trying to achieve over the longer term. All right. So Alana, if you just hit that button there on the outcome. So it's just asking, whenever I talked about at the start, Alana, before we come off this page, we'll just ask you to go up to the top again, but we'll not do it now, but just to show people where that document is. We have a list there that basically has 12 outcomes. Okay. And whenever you hit the theme, whatever particular theme, the T-Box theme you've chosen, this limits the amount of outcomes you have down below. Okay, again, that's just based on our experience of how the work has been broken down in the past. But that's just really us asking you to select something there. So you've selected our safe community up above. It's now saying, yeah, here is some of the outcomes around that. So it's just, if you select one of those, whatever one you want there, Lana, okay, and then it's asking you to give a wee bit more information about what you're wanting to achieve. So look, that can be the usual stuff. Now, again, I know above that it's asking you for kind of numbers and things like that, but if you want to just give a general sense in there, it's the kind of usual kind of stuff around who, and it depends on the sort of information you want to put in, but generally here's just some examples of the number of participants you're wanting to engage in the program overall. If there's any particular training, is there ones you're wanting to provide accredited and non-accredited training to? What about desirable joint actions between your organisation and others? That could be other organisations. It could be with statutory public bodies. It's just trying to say, look, longer term, where are you wanting to get to? Are you developing any particular resources, developing different resources, and what's your dissemination strategy? It could be a research or a training program or whatever else it is. And then if there's any other information you want to add, the usual kind of W5 questions there about who, what, where, when, why. Again, it's just getting the general kind of flavour to what you're wanting to achieve over the longer term. And basically you have 200 words max there to do that, okay? So again, that just helps the person assessing the application to get a general sense of, okay, here's what you're doing and here's where you're wanting to go with that. All right. And then as we go down, see this how well you did it. Now you'll see all these kind of terminology from our from kind of outcomes-based accountability and things like that. But what I will say is this next question about how well you did it, we're asking you to kind of, if you kind of had a survey or had a survey question, what type of question would help you to kind of give the best sense of what you're wanting to achieve in this program of work. So at this stage, we're only asking you to select a particular question here. Now, these are ones that have been they've been used, for example, on the Life and Time survey and things like that. All right. So at this stage, it's only asking what kind of, again, it's just helping whoever's assessing this to build up a kind of general sense of what is this program wanting to achieve. So what you'll find is within other funding programs in the executive office that there's more of a move towards using the kind of surveys and questionnaires, the kind of before and after measure. Now we're not on that road with the core funding program again because we're a different fund. We are a core fund. We fund people and run costs. We don't fund projects as such. So we will be doing additional work on how we best measure the impact of the core funding program, and we're obviously involved with a number of organizations doing that. So, but at the minute, we're just asking you to kind of choose one of these questions that seems most relevant, or you would see most relevant to your program that would help you to kind of get a sense of the actual impact it's making. So what I would say is don't be worrying too much about this particular question at this stage. But again, Alana, if you want to just pick a whatever question there, okay. Now we're coming towards the end, so everybody, I know it's been a lot of talking at you, so this is towards the end of this first work plan. Okay, so you can have a second outcome if you want, okay, and you can put in that information again that you put in above there, but there's no asterisk beside it, so it's not mandatory. If you feel everything's covered under one outcome, that's fine, so you don't need to put this information in here. So Alana, if we just go down to the bottom of the page, and Alana's going to hit the Save Progress button, okay? Now, it's just to show you, whenever you hit the Save Progress button, obviously it saves the information, but it's saying to you, oh, you haven't added in something in here, okay? So I think it was down at the needs assessment part, wasn't it, Alana? So if we just go down, it should highlight it there for you. So it's highlighted there in red and said, look, you need to put information in here. You've forgotten to put it in. So if Alana puts just your dummy information there, Alana, that's fine. So again, just make sure you're content with what's been put in there. Alana, say yes, thank you, Alana. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so that is saved that. Now, Alana, just before we go down, if we just go up slightly there, Alana, so see over there when I've talked about the core funding themes and the core funding outcomes there, okay, I would advise you to, before you complete your application form or before you even start it, download the program, the guidance notes, download the information around the strategic kind of work in terms of TBUC and the program for government, and download these two documents about the program themes and outcomes. Okay. Now the themes and outcomes, the themes are those drop down menu below the TBUC headings, and then the outcomes. So there's 12 outcomes on a green page. Okay. So I would just advise you to have a look at those and make sure you're happy and content that your proposed work area, your proposed program of work is addressing a number of those themes and outcomes. And if you're struggling with that, then you maybe need to think about if is core the most relevant funding program for me. But again, you can always have that conversation with us and we can give you, a wee bit of guidance on that. Okay, so Alana, that is one work area done. Okay, now what I need to show you here is you've done one work area and you're happy and content with that, and you're wanting to do maybe right. I'll just go through the next page, Alana. Thank you. It'll be easier doing it that way. Okay, so what this is asking you here is, do you require a second work area template? Now, if you hit yes, it'll basically be a repeat of what you've already done there, but it's for a second work area. So you might have a big strategic piece of work that you want to do, and you're going, okay, this is going to be my second piece of work. Okay, so you just basically repeat what we've done there now. But what we're going to do now is hit no. So you're saying, I'm happy to have covered everything. Okay, so you're hit no, and you just have to bear with us on this. So if you hit no there, thanks, Alana. If you just go on the next page, then it asks you to do it. Basically, you have to do this for every work area. Okay, to confirm this. So it's asking you, right? You don't want one, so you definitely don't want a third one either. So, folks, we just have to. This is just the way this system works. Okay. This is where I need some background music, but anyway. So yes, and there you go. Thanks, Alana. Okay, Alana, thank you. So, folks, where we have got to is you're now hopefully happy and content with the work plans that you've put in. I'm just going to talk about this wee part of the application form, and then I'll let Paul come in again. We were talking about how your core fund is going to be managed by your organisation. Okay, now what this part of the application is for is, we know again from previous experience that, for example, some of the work area you've put in. So, say you have applied for either director's post or a community relations coordinator officer post, for example, where that work plan that we talked about there before, about where the work was going to take place, right? Yeah, there's a clear relationship between what you're asking for on that particular work. But we also know that you might be applying for example, other posts, whether it's a finance officer or an admin officer or whatever else it might be. But there's also other functions that maybe aren't captured particularly well in the work plan that you've put in there. So what we're saying here is you can add in information here on other kind of support work or any kind of other support functions that, for example, if you apply for funding for a director, some of the work they might be doing is direct delivery, but other parts are about oversight of programs or management of programs. So, Alana, if you just go onto that box there, okay, in the top box there, we're just asking if there's anything else that you want to put in there about any other roles or any kind of other big pieces of work that need to be done. So you could say, you know, whether you want to click on finance management there, thanks, Alana, and then you can say in that box about, it just tells you there, clearly state who in your organisation will be carrying out the proposed activity and provide details of the activities to be carried out. Again, all we're trying to do there is give you a wee bit of space to capture. You know, it could be a finance manager doing that role, or it could be the director doing that role, but it always helps us if we're asked the question, for example, state core funding, what does that enable to happen? We're going, well, actually it allows this whole body of work to take place, but it also supports these other support functions that allows an organisation to operate. And we understand that sometimes this work is work that can get lost in the kind of general picture of work that's being supported. Okay. So again, Alana, if you just want to add in some dummy information there, okay. So we've only got one of those mandatory. So if one of those boxes is fine for you, that's grand. You know, as we did before for the other boxes, if you get to second and third and you want to add in another row, you can do that. So that's fine. But what we say is here, look, just put in as much or as little information you think is required. You don't feel the need. If you don't need to go kind of filling in a load of these boxes, there's no need to, okay, depending on whatever your funding application is. But again, it's just to give a wee bit of recognition towards some of the other duties that are being supported by core funding within your organisation. This sort of information also helps. I know Paul will talk about the assessment criteria later, but in terms of a kind of a value for money assessment, it's given a wee bit more detail around maybe what the finance person will be doing or what the admin person will be doing to support the core functions of your organisation. So that information, again, is very, very important to provide that as much as you can. But again, if you don't need to go on beyond any particular amount of information, you don't need to, okay? So folks, I appreciate there's been a lot of information thrown at you there, okay? So again, we can take any immediate questions afterwards and then you can follow up with us as well.
So really, we're moving to the next point. It's looking at the salary details and stuff of the post that you're looking to, or posts that you're applying for. So you'll see at the top of there in terms of, we've kind of pre-filled that in. So you have the CR director, for instance, the salary, the total cost of that post. And you'll see there at the, for instance, the percentage requested from CRC, the maximum is 90%. Some will ask, some posts will be at 20%, some will be at 50%, some will be at different points, depending on the amount of funding that you have. What it will do is, and when you put the percentage, it will automatically collate what that figure is. And if you see there's a second post in terms of an administrator, and that feeds back to what Damien was saying. Sometimes an administrator may not be directly involved in delivery, but they're absolutely vital for the organisation. So that's what the previous box was, to try to make sure we capture that and to give that the value that it's needed. So You can fill in as much in terms of the posts and the percentage and the details on that. Then you'll come down to the bottom and it says total amount of salary requested from CRC is 25,000. Now, that's automatically tallied on that. If you come down again, in terms of this, you will have, see with the job title, you'll see that part. So CR Director and Admin, you need to fill that in. And then it'll automatically, so there's an analyst just saying like, so test, and then the salary costs, whatever that may be. They'll total at the top above, but you need to put them in manually there. And then that'll tally that up automatically, but you just need to put those figures into that. In terms of running costs, so as we said, there's 5 basic running costs that we cover: travel, rent, phone, internet, insurance, heat and light, and audit. So sorry, 5, so it should be 6, excuse me. But those are the legitimate costs that are allowed. Sometimes in this, I would caution against asking for more than is reflected in the work plan. So I know there's always, when you're making an application, say, well, look, if you need 10, ask for 15, or if you need 20, ask for 30. There's a natural instinct in that. But what that does is sometimes when you look at the work plan and what's being delivered against what's being asked for, you can say, I'm not sure, there's a value for money question here. There's no problem, and when you look at it and go and asking for X amount of money, if there's a very tight, clear work plan there that you say, yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. That's a well-reasoned argument, and that's fine. We can look at that. The reason I say it is because it has happened in the past where organizations kind of fell on the value for money question. So they were asking for a significant amount of money, but when you actually looked at what was being delivered for that, it didn't match. It didn't match particularly well. Now, in terms of scoring, what we have found over the last number of years is that 2 or 3 marks can make a massive difference between, where it is on the ranking scores. So you can, and there's been a number of times where you went, brilliant proposal, that scored well, it's in a tight scoring frame with everyone else, and then something like that for value for money, and you're like, that's just not, it hasn't made a strong enough argument for that, so it loses marks on there, and that end up impacts overall whether we're able to support it or not. So try and ask for what you need, and that's being strongly reflected in your application form in terms of the work plan delivery. That's the best advice I can give when it comes to this. Also, bear in mind, funding is tight. There's no question on that. And so it's a question of actually saying, okay, you might have 3 or 4 posts. You think, well, they would be eligible. But it might be saying better going, actually, we picked 2 of those that we're going to apply the core for and link it to that program. That might be a course of action. It is certainly something to consider. I know that when the core scheme funds, I think there's in total, we've about 65 different posts that we're funding throughout those sort of 29 organizations. So there's a variance there where there's a number of posts that we're contributing to at different levels, but it's just to bear that in mind, that it really is evidence based. So and you need to be able to do that in terms of it. So if we go on down there, it says and in terms of whether these are the salaries are applied for new positions or positions that currently exist. So the position currently exists, how are they being funded now? In terms of who's supporting that, and also it's important to include how long that's left on that. So you might say, well, actually, there's we're being funded through Children in Need, or we're being funded through Bike Lottery. That funding runs out in March 24 or April 25 or whatever that is. It gives us a sense of, in terms of what funding has been secured and what you still need to secure, but and also in terms of the posts, just exactly a position of where they're at. The next question you're going to be asked is how many years is your organisation plan for? It's up to 3 years. Reality is most will be 1 to 2 years. We have made some 3 years awards, and we've tried to do that to try and create a wee bit of stability for as bit more stability as we can. But it is, but the average is 2 years. You can absolutely ask for 3. There's no question that's absolutely fine. You can also ask for 1 or 2. That's fine also. But just in terms of expectation, the vast majority are 1 to 2 year contracts. The average is 2. The average is 2 years contracts. So, one of the things we'd ask for as well then is your matching funding arrangements. That can be whatever sources they are. Sometimes it can be from, if you generate your own income, say it's through a social enterprise or through room hire or things like that, and said the organisation is going to contribute to that. That's important to include as well. That's as part of the sort of match funding. But in terms of also looking at if you have other bids that you're currently making, to include those as well, and a time scale on that. So that gives us a sense of, okay, financially where things at, and also what's the likelihood of other funding becoming available. If there is say for instance, you're saying like, we'll know in December when that happens. Something it means then we can check with you to say, listen, you'd said, we're looking at the assessments in December, January, and say, did you get word on that yet? If you have got an update on that, it's just helpful for us to know, so we can say, actually, yeah, that funding was successful. Great. So it means there's a bit more stability there. So because you've been able to secure that funding or not. So that's why it's important to do that. So then we're on the other financial details. So as we go through HMRC, it's a big red flag, and that's and it's been a challenge for it's been doing for a number of organisations in terms of debt. That's why we need to check in terms of you're fully up to date with all payments to HMRC, and that there's no existing debts greater than a month. We know you can work a lag in terms of that, but it also means that it's just an indicator. So, and we need to know that if there's an issue, because sometimes there can be historical debts that have been gathered, but as long as we understand how those are being paid and how that's being worked through, so that's why we're asking that. The other question is, the organisation is fully up to date with all work pensions, and there's no existing debts greater than a month. Again, it can be an Achilles heel in terms of organisations with pensions. So it's just for us to make sure in terms of that financial stability that's there. The box there say agree term of award. You'll not see that. You'll be able to write it for yourself. So yeah, we agree. Give us 3 years. That would be great. Okay, so really what it's saying that confirming that the application's been submitted with the knowledge and authorization of your management committee or board, and because it actually, if you're successful, the board have to sign the contract because they're signing it and taking that liability on behalf of the organisation. So it's a confirmation of that. In terms of the information maybe in the application may be made available to other agencies, that's in relation to in terms of other funding. If there's sometimes if there's district council funding we will work with, or there's central good relations fund which the TU will work with. It's just so say like we have an application from X. Have you guys we understand you guys have an application from there as well. Are you going to be funding that, or where that's at? So it's an exchange of information on that basis, but it's to make you aware of that just as we go forward. One of the things also is, and this is part of as we go forward, the visions and values of CRC. This is what we stand for. This is what we do. This is the work that we're committed to, and it's in the organisation needs to be, the work in that has to be consistent with ours, so we can work together. So it's just a confirmation of that. And go through that. And it is, I would say, make sure your management committee know and have said and have seen the application. It just makes it a lot, in terms of going forward, a lot smoother. And also just in terms of, so they're aware of the information that's going out. Now we're into the kind of, this is the documents that we really need in terms of things that are put in. So your constitution, your articles of association. Make sure and this is where we were saying earlier about the making sure you upload the right document. This is really key on that. Your organizational strategic plan, your most recent audited accounts, and your most recent management accounts. Now, difference between the two. Audited accounts are what happened over the year. Your management accounts are the accounts that you would be putting together for your board. So the latest this is the most up-to-date picture. So when you're putting an application in, you're saying, okay, would be to, October 22, this is the state of our finances at that point. Because we know there can often be a lag between the audit accounts and the management accounts. And what we've found in the past is that sometimes there's things that there's things missing, there's things in the audit accounts that aren't in the management accounts and vice versa. That's why we ask for them. And that's what we mean by management accounts. So it really is, and it's something to say, like, when you're presented to the board, say, here's a financial picture. This is the most recent that we have of where we're at. Because audit accounts also may not take account of funding that's come in since they were last done. Things like that. So that's why it's important to include on that. Your organizational chart, just an outline of, here's us, here's what we do, here's our structure. The list of board and committee members, just in terms of, this is about establishing bona fides as well. So we understand, here's an organization, this is structure, this is how we understand it. Also, in terms of community relations policy or good relations policy or quality policy, they're under different names, but there needs to be at least one of those. That needs to be updated. That needs to be uploaded. Part of it is in terms of working in the area. That's what it would be seen as a good relations organisations working in that area. It'll have one of those. This next thing is, does your organisation work with young people or children, young people, or vulnerable adults? If it's yes, then you're being asked if your organisation is working to upload your appropriate safeguarding policies. And that's important that they are in place. But the second thing on that you'll say is, please confirm what safeguarding training is provided to staff, volunteers, and board members, and how often are your policies reviewed. Quite often some people say, we have a child protection policy, but we haven't updated it in 3 years. And so for us, that stuff's key and it's important, particularly when you're working, saying, with children, young people, or vulnerable adults. It's key. But it's key that the whole organisation, and that there's a culture of training and updating on that. So that's why we have that there. And we're nearly, I think we're nearly there. I think that's the last thing. So what you can do is, if you return to the summary, and if you just return to the summary there on that, you can be able to check your progress as you go through. So if you go through in terms of that table, that's so you can see, the additional information that goes to the last thing. So the things you do update, that's in progress. So everything else is complete. Happy days, right? I can bank that. I know where I am. And as I say, you can save it and come back to it, because it's a lot to put in one sitting, and you probably run with different documents at different times. So that's the application form in terms of that. So thank you for staying with us, and I appreciate this is a lot of information. One of the reasons why we're recording it is so you can watch it back and check on it again. And will also be available as well, just in terms of for checking up. So, Alana, if you want to close down on that. Really, the next thing is the application hard scored. That's the kind of the kind of key sort of start to give you an outline of what we do. Deirdre is our core funding officer. So Deirdre will be a point of contact as well, just in terms of keeping you right with applications and things like that. So Deirdre, if you want to, there we are. So she's going to take you through in terms of the application process. We're trying to be as transparent with you as we can and say this is how we do it. So Deirdre, a new voice, so you don't have to listen to me anymore.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, folks, I'm going to go through this. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly because a lot of the messages Damien and Paul have already alluded to, but there are some key messages that might be worth reiterating. In terms of the assessment process, it's not rocket science. Most of you who have gone through application processes before, these will be quite familiar to you. There's 3 elements that will be considered. We'll have an assessment of the application and the materials presented. There will also be financial analysis and scrutiny. And then we'll also look at any significant findings from a review, for example, from groups who've previously been in receipt of core funding. We obviously have to look and see how did that go before? Were there any key issues? How are they addressed? Where are we at now with that? In terms of how the assessment is scored, we use the following guidelines. So you'll see there methodology and outcomes 60%, a significant part, so very, very important. However, what I would say also is that value for money, your organisation experience and track record, governance and financial arrangements are also critically important. Combined, they make up the other 40%. But as Paul has already said, the margins between where we cut off, where we can fund and not fund, are very finite. And therefore, it is really critically important that all of these, that you're giving us you get your maximum score possible out of all of these criteria. And also your organizational experience and your governance and financial arrangements are really, really very important because this is public funding that we're dealing with. So irrespective of the value and the strategic nature of your project, if you're not able to administer that appropriately and properly as public funds should be, well, then that is going to be a critical issue. So it's really, really very important. Okay, Alana, we move to the next one. Okay. So in terms of the assessment process, the methodology and outcomes, okay, so there are 3 things we look at there. The first 2 I'm going to highlight specifically because the alignment of outcomes with strategic priorities and welcome statements and the fit with programme remit. I'm really going to refer you guys back to the guidelines. The guidelines are critically important, and they're really important because they point towards the very unique nature of core funding. It's not project funding. We're very much looking at what are the core positions that are required to be imposed in an organisation in order for them to be enabled to actually deliver on the work plan that they have highlighted there. So it's really, really important. We have the guiding principles, and I'm going to bring you to those. They're in the guidance notes, but I really do want to highlight them. This funding is for key principles that, first of all, the work must be intentional, and there must be clear good relations purpose from the outset. So good relations and clear good relations intent is very, very important. It must also address an identified good relations need. So you need to be able to clearly demonstrate the good relations need it wants to address. It should evidence what are the target outcomes it will use to measure impact. And it also must show how the unique contribution is making to good relations. And that points very much to the strategic nature of your work. How is it complementing and working with other work and additional to other work that's going on out there with regards to good relations? It's the strategic importance of promoting good relations in Northern Ireland. So therefore, you're working with all those other organisations that are out there as well with regards to good relations. And in terms of the fit with the programme remit, again, I'm pointing to the guidelines, and your organisations that are seeking funding from the core funding programme, you must be able to demonstrate a commitment to the underlying principles of the Community Relations Council, You must be able to show a capacity to enhance and sustain work of high quality in pursuit of these principles and have a track record of engagement in community relations work. You have a capacity to engage significant and diverse elements of Northern Ireland society in the improvements of community relations. And also, again, point to the strategic nature of your work and this fund, a capacity to work together with other organisations and agencies in the promotion of community relations principles and practice. And finally, to have an intention to address a strategic need or gap in existing community relations provision. All of those things really highlight the strategic nature of this fund, because I think you could very much look at the detail you provide in your work plans, and then you come to your budget and you're talking about 1 post or 2 posts. But what you need to be able to visualize in that application form is, through your work plan, you're providing the story of what your organisation is going to be doing in that year with regards to good relations. And in your budget, you're providing us with the information about the post that is core to actually enabling that work to be done. It's very much enabling and levering that work. You may be getting funding for those particular activities from other bodies, but those core posts that are required to enable your organisation to actually deliver that work is what we will see within the budget. When we're looking at your organisational experience and track record, again, I've pointed towards some of that, but providing you evidence of skills and experience and outcome-based work and development work in a complex environment. Also demonstrating your understanding of the policy and contextual issues within the CR sector. There are a number of issues that are ongoing at the minute. I don't need to go into those in detail. You guys are the experts with regards to that, but there are some key critical issues that are coming up almost on a daily basis. And it's really to provide us with demonstrating to us that you have an understanding of those and have some view of your role in terms of attempting to address those within the sector. And then also we'll look at your governance and your financial arrangements. Paul has looked at that already. You're demonstrating your adequate match funding, and also that you have your good relations and policy. And I suppose what I would say about the good relations and good relations policies in place, it's not just having the policies, but it's demonstrating how you actually work by those and operate by those in the daily work of your organisation. Key points to consider is really read the guidance notes thoroughly before completing the application form. As Paul has already said, they have been updated, and I would really point you towards those key principles within the guidance notes as well. Funding is finite. We can't fund everything, and we really do need you to pay attention to those key principles. Do not assume we have prior knowledge of your work. Yes, there's a number of the organisations we'll have been dealing with before, but we can only score on the information provided in your application form. So it's a vital, critical document that is worth putting the time and effort into to demonstrate what it is you're actually hoping to achieve. Make sure you have uploaded all your documentation before submitting your bid. The system will not recognise whether it's the correct information uploaded, so make sure it's up to date. For example, your accounts. Don't be giving us 2019 accounts. Give us the accounts that are up to date, because the system will recognise whether you've uploaded them or not, but they're not going to know if they're the most up-to-date ones. Paul has already said plain English is fine. There aren't any buzzwords. I know there's acronyms and various things that we all use, but really it's about that word count. And believe me, I write applications for another organisation voluntarily, and it can be very difficult to limit those words, but it's really important to try and get across in that limited word amount what it is that you're actually doing. And again, it's pointing towards that strategic nature of what you're doing. And also, we've already said there's a difference between your management accounts and annual accounts. I suppose what I would highlight just in summary, guys, at the end is that the issues that have maybe come up previously that have where organisations have fallen down, perhaps incomplete applications, we've already alluded to those, not referring to the guiding principles, understanding the nature of funding, that it's core, that it's strategic, and it's good relations. Also, where you have put in targets that are aspirational as opposed to being based on knowledge and need. You may be asked about them. You have to be able to demonstrate that these are based in evidence and that they are not aspirational. And also what I would say is about inflated budgets. Really be very realistic as to what it is that you need from core funding in order for your program to be delivered. And as Paul had already said, you may feel that, oh, I'll put in 30 grand, I'll get 20 grand. That's not how it's going to work, guys. So really be very realistic in relation to the budget that you require.
See the value for money aspect. Paul, you were saying that it's evidence-based, and I'm just wondering, is there like a standard set of objective evidence that you use to do that, or is it different across all applications? Can you be a wee bit more detailed about how that's done?
I think you're looking at it, part of it is because it's the variety of applications, so it's very different in terms of, so you're looking at the work plan in terms of what's its reach, what's the numbers, what's the time and investment going to be needed into that to make that work, to make that a viable project. So there's a judgment call on that as well. There's also a point where you're looking at it going, is that a reasonable bid against the work plan? Part of that also includes the infrastructure. So it may well be saying, yep, there's a team of 4 people that are working. They need someone to help manage that. They need somebody to or they'll need a finance officer for that. So we're trying to look at it in its entirety as much as possible. Is there a formula in terms of saying X equals Y, which equals 2.5 posts or 3 posts? No, there's not. But what we're trying to look at and say, look, in that work plan, and in terms of has it's outlaid, is that a reasonable bid? So sometimes you look at it and you go, I've seen bids for someone saying like we're asking for £80,000, but you actually looked at the what its influence was. You said actually that's working with 60 people. I mean, effectively, that's working with 60 people. You think that's not a good equation in terms of, so you're trying to look at that. You're also looking at saying the organisation and if it's working across a number of programs. So not just numbers, but also the difficulty, the challenge of the work as well. So and the intensity of it. So there's a range of factors, but essentially what you're trying to look at and say, does that represent value for money in terms of saying that's a realistic cost? And also, well, bear in mind, we do know that in terms of running costs and in terms of consumables, they're going to go up this year. So, we'll expect that. Do you know what I mean? So it's also reasonable in terms of market value. So if someone said, listen, our electric bill has gone up by 30% this year or 50%, then we'll take that into account.